The rescuer, it's not a selfless act, it's actually a survival mechanism. Welcome to another episode of Trigger Proof, live from Barcelona. It is a pleasure to be here once again. This is my last broadcast from Europe, unfortunately. We've been improvising the whole time. One in Paris, two in Barcelona, and who would have thought that this next episode, I believe it's episode 13 or 14, I think episode 14, I've completely lost count here. We're talking about, are you a rescuer? Here is how to rescue yourself if that's the case. For those of you who have never met me before and this is your first broadcast, either live or on replay, welcome. My name's Dr. Nima Rahmany. I've been a chiropractor for the last 18 years, coming on 19 actually, and I have been observing again and again the underlying root cause of why patients have been coming in to see me in the first place. And every single time, I can tell you, most times, if it's not a physical injury from sports or an accident, I can see that it's actually a stress-related problem that gets them into the office. And so wanting to be able to make a difference for them in that department, little by little, I started to see that I could actually make an impact by teaching them as to why they were in the office in the first place. And I started to become an educator in my office. And little by little, over time, I would start to see patterns of what got people into the office. And usually it was caused and created by a relationship breakdown or a breakdown in understanding who they were with respect to their positioning in the universe, their purpose, and their work. So their purpose and work disconnection, a disconnection or a limbo in a relationship breakdown, and now you have stress which affects the body and has you going to the doctor in the first place. And unfortunately, most of the time, the treatments are external based and never do you really go to the doctor to really find out the underlying root cause. And one of the main triggers, because this show really is about being trigger proof. Trigger proof meaning unperturbed by externals, being able to be at control and at cause from the space between stimulus and response, and being able to stretch it as wide as possible to give yourself choice, to give yourself options, to be able to be at cause for the complete transformation of your life and create the life you desire. I hope that that's clear. Oftentimes I meet people in my travels and they ask me what I do, and basically I tell them I'm a teacher. I teach people how to get connected with themselves, clear their past trauma, become mission-driven, empathetic leaders. Leaders of their families, leaders of businesses, leaders of their lives. And this becomes a major constraint in you being able to lead your life. What do I mean by that? Well, what I've observed is that we all actually want the same thing. We all want to be in relationships which feel fulfilling, where we have a connection to that other person and that other person is connected with us through intimacy. We want to be able to be seen and heard and take off the mask and be ourselves and be loved for who we are and not pretend to be someone else. We also want to feel safe in our bodies and connected to a cause that's greater than ourselves. And when all of these are powerfully aligned, we show up in the world confident. We show up in the world purposeful, mission-driven, well-resourced, and in service to others. But unfortunately, trauma, drama, relationship breakdown, and disconnection from self is what causes us to not have those things. And one of the main constraints that I see in people who are struggling with relationship breakdown, struggling with health problems, is they are empaths or rescuers. Now tell me if this, it resonates with you. So whenever you see somebody around you who's going through a difficult time, you just are so uncomfortable, you just want to jump in and help. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you, that you constantly find yourself saying, oh, I'm doing this for other people. I'm constantly worrying about other people and trying to help other people and fix other people and rescue other people. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You have the disease to please. You are busy doing something for yourself and somebody who's important to you. This could be even your kids, your partner, your spouse, your coworkers. They snap their fingers or they sneeze and you drop whatever the hell you're doing, and then you're off helping them. And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. However, if you're doing it to a point where you are running on empty, running on fumes, to the point where your tank is completely empty, you're not doing anyone a favor. And what ends up happening is you start to develop fatigue and exhaustion and you lose sight of yourself. And here's the other thing, it's not necessarily in every area of your life. Tell me if you notice that in any area of your life, in your relationships, in your work. This definitely was me, specifically when it would come to relationships. I have this tendency to have this hero God complex where I want to go and rescue the damsel in distress. There's something about that I would constantly find myself being drawn to and attracted to, that damsel in distress. And I thought that it was something that I could do because I'm such a helpful person and I love to serve, but it turns out selfless act is just as selfish as it is selfless. And so what I would do is I would constantly go into these relationships and find myself frustrated at the fact that I wasn't feeling seen. I wasn't feeling heard in those departments. And it wasn't until I had a big breakdown where I had to look at myself and realize that I was not doing this completely selflessly. I was doing it so that I could be important. I was doing it so that I could be relevant. I was doing it so that I could finally find a way of being seen. Because it turns out that if you have this rescuer complex, it actually comes, when you're doing it unconsciously, it comes from a place of, I am not worthy. I am not valuable. And the thing is, if you don't get this right and clear it, you develop a sense of codependency with that other person. You derive your value based on externals. In this case, how you're seen by your partner. You derive your value based on your ability to fix and solve another person's problems, and it conveniently distracts you from actually working on healing what's necessary for you. After a while, you start to develop this resentment, which doesn't sound so altruistic after a while, because true altruism is you're doing it without an expectation. But that expectation is there, you're just unconscious or pretending that it's not there. It starts to develop with a resentment afterwards, and all of a sudden you become reactive and you get triggered, not understanding that there is an unconscious complex totally creating it. And like I just said, you develop this sense of false altruism and selflessness. These are the people that usually will say things like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of doing things for other people. I just constantly do things for others and I'm exhausted and I just can't do for myself. And this is like this false altruism, and they don't even know it. They think that it's altruistic, but it's a selfish act. Your rescuing others is a selfish act. And if you want to heal from that, it is wise for you to actually frickin' own it so that you can turn the focus on something, instead of something outside of you, you can put it back on yourself. And lo and behold, you start to empower those people around you, which can be a very scary thing if you're not resourced. The other thing that I wanted to share, and we're gonna have Dr. Russ Kennedy come on and share his experience with it, is that if you don't actually turn this around and you don't solve this, your body will start to do it for you. See, the universe is working for you, not against you, to keep you authentic. And if you don't get back into authenticity and be in fair exchange and be aware of what you're getting out of the deal by rescuing, what happens is you start that your dissociation from yourself causes you to stop really being connected to your body. So what does your body do to force you back into your body? It creates health problems, digestive disturbances, hormonal problems, and chronic pain, chronic illnesses, chronic fatigue. Anything you have the word chronic in front of, I'm almost 99% sure that you're dealing with a rescuer whose body is actually trying to wake them up to get back into themselves and resource themselves and rescue themselves before they turn around and try to derive their importance from rescuing other people unconsciously. So where do you want to look is if you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and you're using it a lot as excuses for not doing things and for your lot in life, sorry, I know this is going to really trigger you, but I have absolute certainty that anybody with a diagnosis of fibromyalgia quite often are dealing with a I am not worthy or valuable story, and the body is trying to get you to do it for yourself. You either pay attention and take inspired action, or you sit back into your victimhood, you ignore the signs and try to go to 5 to 10 different specialists and doctors to rescue you, when none of them will ever do that. The answer is always within you. And to illustrate this point, there is nobody better in the world than to introduce Dr. Russell Kennedy, who actually has decades of experience, not only as a medical doctor helping people with stress-related problems and health-related issues, but somebody who happens to be a self-proclaimed rescuer himself. Russ, is this true? I'm just gonna welcome you on. Is it true?
Hey,
am I accurate? Was I being accurate with my depiction of you?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. I think, you know, when I was younger, my father was quite profoundly mentally ill. My mother was completely stressed and anxious because of the whole family dynamic. So I learned how to take care of both of them at a very young age, 12 or 13 years old. So what happened with me is my stress hormones go up. I've got a lot of my identity from being a rescuer. And sometimes when I was younger, the only time I felt safe was when I was actually looking after someone else, because it gave me this empowered sense. So of course, when you say selfish, it is selfish, but it's unconsciously selfish. It's totally. We try and go back to the same place where we felt safe when we were younger, because we felt safe as a rescuer, but you can only do that for so long, because when you see someone in trouble or needing your help, your stress hormones go up. Your body goes into fight or flight, because you have to help this other person to try and get back to that place of safety that you never created because you didn't have a chance when you were younger.
So, sorry to interrupt you there. I just wanted to jump in because you were saying something super duper important then. There's the distinction right there, is that the rescuer, when you're doing it, it's not a selfless act. It's actually a survival mechanism. When growing up, everything was absolutely such a shit show that you didn't feel safe because your parents weren't fully resourced in themselves, because they weren't familiar with doing the work. They were responding to their own traumas, and so they weren't able to be present. So the way that you felt safe was to take care of others, but to do so in an unconscious way, because while doing that, you dissociated from yourself. It wasn't from a resource place. It was completely out of fear, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we empaths are very, very good at feeling and reading other people, because that's where we put all our energy. And if you put all your energy and attention and awareness on something, you're going to get really good at it. The cost, the price that you pay for that, is that you lose connection with yourself. And as you lose more connection with yourself, as you said, your body starts to complain. Your body starts to show up with chronic pain, irritable bowel, Lyme disease, anxiety, depression, all these things. I've never seen a case of irritable bowel or essentially migraine headaches or fibromyalgia that didn't have childhood trauma. And it doesn't have to be major trauma too. I mean, I think that's part of the problem. Some of us are really sensitive. I was born really sensitive, so even a mild amount of trauma could have triggered me. You may not have that same level of sensitivity. You may look back at your childhood and go, yeah, it was okay. I had to look after my mom a bit, but it wasn't so bad. But it depends on how that that complex comes together. So if you get pleasure in your brain from a neuroscience perspective, if you get pleasure and safety in your brain from rescuing, that is going to be your go-to for the rest of your life until you become aware that you have to go into yourself first. And then otherwise it'll continue to be a trigger. And I'm on the show Trigger Proof. Thank you for having me on the show. And that's exactly what it's about. It will be a trigger for you. When you see someone who's in pain, that will become a trigger for you.
Yeah, and you'll have a tendency, you'll notice, you will have a tendency to attract yourself to people who need rescuing, who they themselves are complete shit shows, so that you can derive your importance out of it. And that complex plus that complex in an unconscious way, when both parties are triggered, is a recipe for a beautifully toxic, crazy meltdown. Can you relate to that?
Well, why do you think I became a doctor, Nima? Jesus, you know, like I looked after my dad. I looked after my mother. That became part of my identity. So of course I'd become a doctor. Like, why wouldn't I do something like that? So in my personal relationships, yeah, there was a role of that as well. But in my professional duties, of course it was. And that was one of the reasons I burned out, was because I wanted to help people, but I couldn't. And it reminded me of the same situation with my father, where he was just too mentally ill to really get significantly better. So I kept running up against the same thing. So when I would come into my patients who weren't getting better, it would trigger me as well. So again, it's for the rest of the
because the patients can't heal under that old model of medicine that they're trying to get answers from, with the drugs and the surgery. You, in your 7 minutes with them as in the at the doctor's office, was not going to get them any results. Can you tell people, please, as a retired medical doctor who's a neuroscientist, people who are going to the doctor for their chronic problems expecting a solution, can you just please just say it in a way that would really land, that they're not going to get the results there?
Well, first of all, I feel for you. If you're suffering from a chronic illness, it's really difficult. And especially, you know, sometimes we become rescuers because we need to be rescued ourselves. That's actually why we became rescuers in the first place, is to rescue ourselves. So we're looking for this other entity to come in and save us. Now, we do need doctors, we need chiropractors, we need naturopaths, we need all these people. But until you start taking that responsibility for yourself, which goes against your underlying need to be taken care of, which you didn't get as a child, until you really decide, hey, I'm really going to look after myself here. I am going to really look after my triggers and look after my own internal sense of well-being. That part of your body, when you're looking for it out there, your body's not going to get better in here, because the reason your body is yelling at you is it's telling you, pay attention to me, pay attention to the younger self that was hurt, that was damaged, that was in a situation that they couldn't get out of. Pay attention to that person. That will heal you. The drugs aren't going to heal you. They may help with your symptoms, but you have to take responsibility for yourself and use doctors as a resource, not as a parental figure.
Totally. Oh my God. That needs to be your, oh my God, I've never heard that. That needs to be your meme. Use doctors as a resource, not as a surrogate parent. Holy shit. That's a mic drop from a doctor right there.
Well, when you talk about trigger proof, you're really talking about resourcing yourself first. Mm-hmm. And then that's what allows you to become trigger proof. When you're in yourself and there's all this other stuff happening around outside you, if you can go to yourself first, that's when you become trigger proof. I mean, that's what your teachings have taught me.
Totally, 100%. Dr. Russ, thank you so much for your contribution. This is huge, because right now I'm going to go into the process that you and I share with our peeps all over the world, and we do in the workshops. We do it on, virtually, what actually works to help the rescuers rescue themselves so that they can elevate. I'm about to go into it, but I really wanted to say thank you for your contribution, brother.
You're welcome. And there is help. Talk to us.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother. All right. So you might be asking, okay, I'm a rescuer. I get it. I get that it hasn't been, I get that it's got me certain places, but I keep running into relationships where I constantly feel disappointed. I'm constantly with people who are, I'm constantly in relationships where I'm disappointed. I'm constantly feeling like I'm with somebody who's more so on the narcissistic side. I want to feel valued myself in a relationship. I want to feel like there's a reciprocity. I want to feel relevant in myself. I want to look in a mirror and say, I love you, and actually mean it. I want to be able to be confident and certain without an external chaos providing me with validation. Well, I think I have the solution. Well, actually, I don't think. I know that we have the solution. However, the solution isn't in my hands. It isn't in Dr. Russ's hands. It's in you rescuing you. And the reason why I call it the intimacy upgrade is because it involves you being able to truly know yourself. Intimacy means to be known and to know another. And into me, I see. And you cannot solve this without looking at yourself and turning on the light and revealing these truths that you might not want to face. Your biggest obstacle in solving this will be your fear of actually looking at yourself and your past stories. So it's called an intimacy upgrade. And in order to upgrade, you must consider expanding beyond what's possible for you right now. And the first thing that you do in this upgrade is to regulate your nervous system and to realize that you might be triggered constantly. And if you're amped up and high levels of nervous system activation, you're not sleeping well, your digestion's not working, your hormones are all shot, and you're anxious all the time. So you're not in your body, you're dissociated. So you must do work with the breath, exercise, getting chiropractic care, attuning your body, getting yourself attuned regularly through meditation and neurosensory attunement. For example, if I can ask you what the temperature of the air feels like on your skin right now, it would cause you to access your neurosensory system and start to feel and perceive and get into sensation. Dr. Russell Kennedy taught me that, and he's the best at the world at discovering his methodology through absolute necessity in his own life. And so what ended up happening was he came up with his brilliance, which is constantly to get into sensation and attune to what your body is feeling in every moment, into the breath. So nervous system regulation, any type of therapy to solve this thing, if you do it on a dysregulated nervous system, you're wasting your time. You will be anxious, you'll be depressed, your digestion will be shot, it's not gonna work. The second part that you must do in order to upgrade and get yourself to a place where you're not constantly unconsciously rescuing other people is you must dissolve your past triggers of resentment. Resentment, regret, shame, anything you're holding on to is actually messing you up. It is contributing to the downfall of your nervous system, your relationships with others, and most importantly, your relationship with yourself and your purpose. Any chance of your leadership is destroyed when you're holding on to a victim story about your past. So you must work to dissolve the past triggers of resentment. The third thing that you must do is you've got to learn how to dance with that dark passenger. And what do I mean by dark passenger? It's that part of you, that inner critic that says, I'm not worthy or valuable. That is your dark passenger. It's constantly there, and it's your ego trying to protect your wounded inner child. So what you do is, if you told me last year that I'd be talking about this, I would have told you you're absolutely freaking crazy. But the truth of the matter is there's a wounded little child within you that needs reparenting. And Carl Jung said this, that the second half of your life must be dedicated in part to reconnecting with that little childlike part of you that was dissociated when you were trying to seek an apprentice, a mentor to learn the ropes. That part of you got dissociated. So Carl Jung talks about this. So does James Hollis. So does Bradshaw. John Bradshaw talks about this. Really deep developmental psychologists like what's that guy's name again? Gordon Neufeld, that's right. Your need to connect with that inner child part of you that was dissociated, that one that was taking care of mom and dad and deriving their significance from that experience. And what you gotta do is you must energetically, with thought, with body, with intention, give that little child what you wanted from mom and dad, what they weren't able to give and what you weren't able to give because you were so dissociated from yourself, you were constantly taking care of other people. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go back and you're gonna connect with him or her. This might not be the easiest thing, and this is what we help our clients do, and that's probably one of the things that you'll have the most resistance with, because that inner child doesn't feel safe feeling connected to you. So energetically, it's something that you must do, and treat them like you would treat your own child. And it's a very powerful thing when you get it right, because when you get it right, you'll notice that every time you have a trigger or an anxious attack, it's an opportunity for you to connect with your inner child, because it's your inner child screaming at you for attention. That's usually what anxiety actually is, and I learned that from Dr. Russ. And what happens is when you regulate your nervous system and you dissolve your past triggers and you get that part right, you start to feel a sense of presence. You start to be able to feel like you're able to be in your body and it's safe to do so. And when you dissolve those past triggers of resentment and shame and regret, and you've learned how to dance with your dark passenger, that little inner critic, and you have connected with your wounded inner child, you then have a sense of understanding for yourself. You're not judging yourself so much. You're not beating yourself up so much. And you're not playing victim anymore. You've now empowered yourself. You've stopped giving your power away. You've stopped subordinating. You see the innocence of yourself. You understand yourself. You see the innocence of that other person. You understand that other person. You see that there's nothing to forgive. You just see two wounded children actually working through the dance of life. And now you're conscious. And now you have choice. And when you've learned how to dance with your dark passenger and you've regulated your nervous system, a really neat thing happens is you start to develop this thing called authenticity and vulnerability. The thing that we love to see in other people, we crave that with other people. It's so lacking with this social media game, with putting on a mask and trying to pretend to be something greater than you are. And we've all been guilty of it, myself included. And when I found myself constrained, when I found myself in similar familiar situations where I was just faced with feeling so stuck, I had to realize that I have basically not been authentic. I've been putting on a one-sided story when there's always two sides present. And when I could finally integrate my duality and learn how to dance with my inner critic and really feel connected and centered physiologically with my nervous system, all of a sudden I start to develop a sense of authenticity. And once you've done that, you must learn empathic communication, which means as a rescuer, you probably have set up an emotional contract with people that says, I'm taking care of you. I'm gonna put aside my stuff and take care of you. I put aside my stuff and take care of you. Put aside my stuff and take care of you. And then lo and behold, when you wake up and you start to set boundaries and you start to say, I want this, this is what I want in fair exchange, that contract is a little weird for your loved ones. They might not take to it so well. However, if you don't learn proper empathic communication and empathy for yourself, and empathize and see their innocence, then you're likely revert back to the rescuer role because it's not doing the trick and getting you ultimate approval. So it's really about learning how to be empathetic towards yourself first, and then carrying that, and then like rescuing you first, putting on the oxygen mask yourself first before you take care of other people. And that's conscious empathy rather than unconscious empathy, which is dissociating from yourself, you playing on the altruist codependent role, and then all of a sudden you have that narcissist that you attract, and you're just as responsible rather than blaming them for being the narcissist. You got to understand they would not exist without your rescuer energy. So you are part of a dance and you are not a victim. Please get that if you really want to up-level yourself. And then the last part is you're not going to do it alone, and you're not going to do it without a commitment, because this is an unconscious program. It's been with you for life, and it's likely going to take consistent effort to resource yourself, so you are now helping other people, but doing it in a conscious way and constantly connected to fair exchange and saying, listen, I'd love to help you, and this is what I would love in return, so that you now have a caring relationship where you're honoring your values and honoring the other person's values simultaneously. That's the only way to true fulfillment in your relationships. Not a careless relationship where you don't give a shit about their values, not a careful relationships where all you care about is their values and you've dissociated from your own, but a caring relationship where you have your values and theirs, and you're constantly honoring both and creating a win-win. It's my hope that more people get this information, because if you don't really learn the fundamentals like this and be vigilantly going after self-resource and self-love, then you're going to consistently bump up against narcissistic, codependent relationship dynamics, toxic relationships, health problems, disconnection from purpose, and your experience of life is pure shit, because your health is going to turn to shit. It's just, I've seen patterns, I've seen it over and over again, and there's no one here to rescue you except you. So consider this a little life raft, or a rescuing, one of those things that you throw somebody who's drowning. You gotta understand that you gotta take care of you first if you're ever gonna help other people. And this is the way to do it, through reconnecting with the little part of you that was constantly rescuing other people. So let me know if this is relevant to you. We have a couple comments here. Yep, that's me working to stop this behavior. Yes, and Valerie says mind-blowing. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions. Does this resonate with you? Please, in the comment section, let me know what shows up for you. I would love to continue this conversation. If you're not already part of the Art of Powerful Alignment group, please join in. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. Realize and recognize the symptoms. You got a codependent situation, you're building resentment, you have this false altruism, and worst of all, you start to develop chronic health problems that you're looking outside with a pill to fix. And Dr. Russ and myself have been in practice for decades, and we see it again. And when somebody comes in, it's like, oh my God, I can't treat you. I'd rather teach you this, because this is the upgrade of yourself that requires you to rescue you through community. Doesn't mean don't ask for help. It means the answer is not outside of you. The answer is within. So find a guide to help you come to terms and reconnect with yourself. So this, once again, please don't hesitate. Please, every single time, tune in Wednesdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, early morning Thursdays in Australia, and 9 p.m. in Barcelona, Spain, every single Wednesday night. We are live with the show Trigger Proof, which is helping people who are stuck in relationship limbo or career limbo reconnect to themselves, their purpose, become empathic leaders, and create relationships that are fulfilling and caring and loving and aligned. Thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure to be able to broadcast from Europe, dream come true, and I look forward to seeing you next week live on Trigger Proof.